All right, I think I have hit record correctly. Welcome to another lunchtime chat. We are here with someone I met, I guess now maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, at another conference, a We Are conference, with some folks that are doing some dynamic work in this space as well. We hit it off right away. I was so appreciative of what his focus is, and this focus cannot just be one that is of the academy. That's the beauty of what we're getting ready to get into. There's not enough population in the academy to make this a significant focus, so we have to bring it to the table. Um, and although this space is welcoming to all, what I like to do here is make sure that whatever is being discussed at these supposedly higher levels of engagement and intellectual dialogue makes it to the people that need to hear it most, and that need to know that these ideas and thoughts are actually being wrestled with. So the net gains of recognition and care for Black American males in our society, I think is critical right now. There is gains to be made if we decide to really focus and hone in on making that um, a thing that we need to really focus on and do something significantly about. So, without further ado, I'm going to let Dr. Freeman introduce himself, and I want him to tell us his story in a way that connects to why this work is so important to him. So I'm going to mute and I'm going to let Dr. Freeman take over. And I appreciate you being here, man, and making the time to spend with RELC.
Thanks for having me. All right, so let's look at a couple of things and then just want to lay out what the focus is of today and then we'll get into it. So I titled this, I was thinking pretty heavy about where I want to go. And this one, I spent a lot of work with leadership as a former principal, which I share my story in a minute, and just the care that comes along with being in leadership roles. And so as I was thinking through it, something that came to mind is the Super Bowl. One of the most watched Super Bowls by Black people came in our last Super Bowl. Most people spent a lot of time analyzing and thinking about Kendrick Lamar, although his performance came with multiple messages. But today I wanted to spend some time really talking through the narration of Samuel L. Jackson as he played the role of Uncle Sam. Um, he mentioned a couple of things. I just poured out the image that he was describing and the words he was sharing as a way to kind of headline our conversation for today. So he talked one about the game. He mentioned this word ghetto. He mentioned this word tighten up. He mentioned the word nice, and then he mentioned this word cheat code. And so I'm using these framings to go through today's conversation. But one of the things I always like to do before I get too deep into anything is to share a little bit about myself. And so this is what I call a content. This is the core of who I am. So I'm going to go from left to right, starting first one from North Carolina, from a place called Berkeley County. If you're from Berkeley County, put it in the chat so I know that I got some family in the space. Speaking of family, right there in the middle is my family from my big brother on the left, all the way to you see me on the right, and then my mom and dad, sisters, my kids, wife, nieces, and nephews, sister-in-laws all there. But the picture that's completely on the right with the young man holding the Bible, that's my brother. I try to always highlight him. He passed away about 3 years ago of cancer. And so one of the things that I've done in every presentation since his passing is put him somewhere in my presentation as a way to kind of honor him and keep him alive and well, because he's near and dear. He was a twin brother to my big brother that you see there on the left of the big family picture. I came to Greensboro in '97 when the North Carolina A&T. Then the young lady in the middle next to me with the pink on is my wife. We have two boys. We have a 17-year-old and an 8-year-old. 8-year-old loves soccer. 17-year-old plays football. He plays for Grimsley. They just won state championship this past season, and he's going into his senior year next year. I used to be a principal. I used to be a math teacher for community college for a high school as well. I did career counseling. I got my master's in education. I got an administration, master's in school administration, and all those things, and got an EDS, and then into my doctorate at Appalachian State. So that's just a snapshot of what brings me to today's conversation. But the core of what brings me here is I remember in my AP years, I would go to the principal meetings with my principal, of which I was real close to her and really thought that I had a good sense of what being a principal was like. So she would take me to all these different meetings. But one particular meeting was the very first one that I went to the principal's meeting. And I noticed a couple of things, but one particular one that stood out the most is that all the black principals sat in the back, all the white principals sat up front. I noticed that the black principals were dressed in their Sunday best, and the white principals had on their casual, i.e., school paraphernalia type stuff. So, which really drove and really bothered me. So, I was 4 years after seeing that of being an AP and a principal when I started my doctorate. I wanted to really drive my work into like what is the Black experience, which leads me to the BlackCrit. So Black critical theory, which is separate from CRT, critical race theory, because critical race theory focused on all people of color primarily, where the BlackCrit focused just on the Black experience. I wanted to understand the Black experience particularly. And so the BlackCrit has three frames. And part of those three frames, if you look at the left, is explore how unfair rules harm Black people. And it positions us to decide on who lives and who thrives through history, via money, economics, culture, and society. The second frame gets into this myth that you got to work twice as hard in order to be success. And then the third gets into this idea of how can Black people just dream again, dream freely, and challenge all false narratives that are driven by our uh, by white dominance. And so I landed on BlackCrit and have become a BlackCrit theorist ever since I discovered it in my doctorate program. And so now when we look at here, so this is just a summary of it. The challenge is with Black critical theory and thinking about where we are currently in societies, how do we understand and celebrate Black identity instead of seeing it in a negative way, which is a core component of Black critical theory? And then how can we be proud and challenge the unfair ideas about Black people in society, both created by us, but also by folks that's not like us? Where number two gets into it examines the lasting impact of anti-Black structures on Black bodies, centering those of African descent only, and how those attitudes have impacted us not being treated as simple as human. Um, and so the last part of our Black critical theory is to kind of land a foundation before we get into the meat of the conversation, is I had two main questions that I've been really thinking about. One is how does the anti-Blackness framing of Black men in society impact the perception of Black men in K-12 leadership roles, particularly as a former principal? And then the second question is how does the framing of Black males in society impact the liberatory imagination of Black male leaders? And so I'm just giving you out of all the answers that I received over the past couple of years of researching this, we're going to focus primarily on two today. One is um, the liberated imagination because of the need for external validation replaces self-actualization. And then the second, these unfair rules and systems that work against them. So I want to just hang our hats on just those two. All right, so let's jump into the meat of it. So at the Super Bowl, uh, Uncle Sam, played by Samuel Jackson, comes out and he gives the salutations and then he says, "Welcome to the great American game." And so as I ponder over this great American game, I begin to reflect on just my whole experience of becoming a leader. And the idea of I started teaching, and then someone says you should be in school leadership, and then I start thinking about to get into school leadership means I can make more money, I can provide for my family, and we plan these things. And then these natural things begin to happen. You begin to renounce parts of your authentic self with hopes of remaining the representation of the Black male in a white dominant environment. In my study of researching this, I've had participants do my research share things like they were asked to cut their braids off. They were asked to get rid of their beard. I mean, they were asked to do things that was taking them away from who they were. And I participated in that whole process of making sure I look a certain way when I go to different spaces. And although I was there in whatever attire I was in, however I was looking, I felt like I was losing pieces of myself. And what ends up happening is you fight against these unfair rules that hurt Black people and can make it hard to be brave enough to dream big, hard to resist the temptation because they tell you that if you do this, then this is what's going to happen, right? If you perform this way, then we can move you up faster. Don't ask this question, don't make this loud noise. This is part of the great American game of Black men, particularly. And one thing I want to just pause and make sure I'm clear about, although I'm talking about Black males, this applies to Black people, period. So I'm just using Black males because that's my particular research. So that's part of the great American game. And so that impact is where we land here. Um, you fall into this space of the fear of making a mistake, of being stereotyped, causing Black leaders to feel like they have to work twice as hard. I spent I will get to work super early, 5:30, and I will leave work around 7, 8 o'clock. And with two boys at this age, I mean, they were 4 and whatever age they were, 4 and 14. It was, you're missing out on things. And I'm working twice as hard, trying to prove to get to become the best principal I can be. At the same time, I'm hearing and knowing that I have colleagues of different race and gender who are showing up to work late, leaving work early, and they're getting the accolades of having this superb school. Um, so this course leads to stress. It leads to being the one and the only. So at one point in my career, I was the only Black male principal at the middle school level within the district. Out of a school district of 26 middle schools, I was the only one. So of course, when I step into a principal meeting, I'm obviously going to stand out, which leads to this thing around being hyper visible. And then you hear conversations from both supervisor as well as colleagues to say, you know, because you're Black, make sure you do X, Y, and Z at a very high level, right? And so you fall into this trap of trying to represent, and you're losing pieces of yourself to make sure you stay within the number. And so one of the things that came up, particularly in my first year as a school leader, is I was young. In my eyes, I was young, but kids would say I was old. But nevertheless, I would always wear hoodies on weekends, and I would wear Chucks throughout the week with maybe a shirt and tie on, and that was my style. And I noticed that folks would come in the school building and be talking to me and not know that I was the principal of the school. And so as I began to do this research, I began to understand that Black males particularly were known for being loud and reckless and uneducatable. And like we come with this approach around being disciplinarians. And so when I heard Uncle Sam say this word around like ghetto, uh, I've heard that language as a leader, as they describe how Black males perform in their leadership roles, particularly around like not getting tasks done at the level of which someone may think it needs to be done, or not doing it how they think it needs to be done. It's a practice of a one right way, which is a white dominant characteristic that is often pushed into leadership roles, particularly for Black males. And so this negative mental image of Black male society led Black males to having these negative interactions. So how people would see Black males in society was impacting how they saw me in leadership roles. I will often ask the question in different presentations and also to my staff at the time is what would change about me if I wore a hoodie on Saturday and a tie on Monday? I'm still the same person. And my participants would describe how they would go. One particular participant shared that he would go to the same um, suit store, been going there for years, and he normally wears a suit, but one particular time he had on a sweatsuit, and they didn't even recognize him when he went into that space. The same place he's going to for years. They it was a disconnect between him and society when he's out on the weekends versus him when he goes there after work. And so this impact has led to additional barriers in leadership that could lead to them not maximizing their leadership abilities. If you are always functioning in a space that you feel like you got to protect, you feel like you are constantly being watched, you're not able to think at a higher level because you often are criticizing every single move that you're making, which leads to you being frozen, not making decisions fast enough or clear enough, and kind of trying to appease those who are around you. So after Uncle Sam described this in the same sentence, it's the same scene, he used the word tighten up. He asked the question, do you even know how to play the game? You need to tighten up. And so part of that tighten up is code switching. And my participants, as well as myself, thought about how this code switching showed up. So one particular one that we've been in my research, is when George Floyd was murdered, and how we got the message from the district office on what we should say and talk about within our roles as leaders, um, which sounds good in theory, and try to make sure that the message is clear, but it reminded us in that language of try to leave your opinions out of it, right? And so as you are leading Black males, Black boys within your schools, and you are a Black male yourself, it's it's impossible to leave your opinion out of something that it's obviously known that this is a murder in this particular case. And I had my first impact of this when Trayvon Martin passed away, when he was killed, under the same thing of at this point, I didn't have my youngest, I had my oldest. And so when he passed away, or was killed rather, um, it took me a while to learn how to even navigate that conversation. And so, which is Trayvon Martin is one of the reasons why I wear a hoodie often. Just as my way of, as I share with my brother, it's just my way of keeping his voice alive. And so part of this code switching is what we call respectability politics, which is the idea of downplaying our values and our expression as a way to appease white people's fears and their anxieties in order to gain this social recognition, to be seen as nice and calm. Um, and so as we as Black male leaders particularly are discussing these uh, horrible incidents of Black males being killed, one of the language out of my 15 participants, some of the language they use is they would teach their Black boys in their schools how to survive this unfair treatment. Um, and then they highlight their shared struggles and the needs for safety over resistance. So this whole idea of like, you just need to get home. And that's the same language I tell my boys, right? I just want you to get home, right? But it is that keeps them home and gets them safe. But how do we fight against this idea that this is even an okay thing? Like it's weird. So what's coming from this is what we call post-traumatic slave syndrome. This idea of passing down from slavery um, these things that's happened through time in order to make sure that we are surviving. And so a goal of mine is how do we shift from surviving to thriving? And so it's really pushing this idea of, yes, nice and calm is one thing, but how do we increase in our resistance to this thing? So far we've been through the game, we've been through the ghetto, we've been through um, the been how do you know how to play the game, tightening up, and now we're at this nice and calm. And so one of the things I want to do now is just kind of summarize what you've heard so far. It's one of these unfair rules that work against Black people make it hard to see true worth beyond those rules. The need to feel belongingness shows we are following these unfair rules more than pushing against them. The great American game has tried to wear us down and distract those who are not tired. So one of the things that stood out to me in this particular Super Bowl performance is there was a scene where Kendrick Lamar and a group of other black males are with him around the street light, and Uncle Sam comes out and says, I see you brought your homies with you. You're trying to use your cheat code, deduct one life. And so I was like, huh, that cheat code and that image was that he was in community. He was coming along with other folks to support the work that he was trying to do in this particular scene. So I began to think about my experience as a leader, my experience of what worked for me over time, and I want to share kind of next steps with my research. The first part is BlackCrit explores, just to recap, freedom while challenging anti-Black systems. The and so Black males need a team to assist in the liberating. That we cannot do this in isolation. It takes a team, and why? Because Black male leaders' voices must be humanized, recognized, and strengthened. Um, and so part of that humanizing, recognizing, and strengthening comes from other people sharing the works of Black men in a positive light. This can increase the resistance of anti-Black structures in particular education. And so where it's landed me is around this idea. I've been doing a lot of work around Afrofuturism because a part of BlackCrit gets into this liberatory fantasy, which led me to understanding what Afrofuturism is and just the idea of creating a new space to anchor unique sounds. Under that, I put redream old dreams in order to produce new dreams. I believe that the work of our forefathers and ancestors have taught us how to navigate these spaces, and we've forgotten those stories. And so we need to go back and learn how to redream some old dreams in order to produce new ones. Second part is identity development, heighten our self-awareness, knowing completely what makes us move the way that we move, navigate the way we navigate, which leads to the third one, which is movement. Movement leads to strengthening our mental and physical health. I think one of the things, not I think, that's not true. I believe that in order for us to, and I got these four things, the core four to prepare for war is these are four things we must do. One, we need to expand our mind and understanding of our own value. Learning about who we are through reading different texts from the past, reading texts from the present, and begin to write and understand who we are as a people. The second thing is social connections. I mentioned in a previous slide, building relationships is super important that we cannot navigate these spaces alone. We have to build community. I particularly didn't highlight practicing kindness because kindness is one of those things where it can get lost sometimes. I'm still doing some research on how to do kindness in a way that you do not um, change who you are for the sake of, because this kind of conflicts with being, or goes along with being nice and calm. But how do we practice kindness in a way that challenges the system versus practice kindness in a way that has us be submissive to the system? So that's purposely not highlighted because I'm still doing research on that. As I mentioned around health and wellness, your body and your energy is super important. Spending time with preparing your body and your mind helps you prepare for this war of dismantling the systems that are constantly pushing Black folks particularly down. And then mindfulness, slowing down to think clearly. We have to be intentional about how we're moving. We have to be intentional about who is in our circle. We have to be intentional about what we take in and how we process those things that we take in. I talk a lot and spend a lot of time around understanding your gates, your mouth gate, your ear gate, your eye gates, and even the things that you take into your body, how these things impact how you move. And if we're not careful, if we're not mindful of our gates, it can lead us into the same path that we're in now, which seems to be slowing down compared to where we were when times like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were in play. We've made a lot of progress. It seems like it's going a little bit slower now than it used to be. And so with that being said, here's the space I'm spending more time in now and just extending my research is understanding how do we redream these old dreams in order to produce new ones. So with that being said, here's the last thing I want to, this is the thing that drives that work. Radical imagination can inspire us to push beyond the constraints of what we think and are told is politically possible. So I'm going to leave you with that as my last slide and just simply say thank you and open the door up for any questions and comments and concerns that people want to talk about.
Man, I'm glad that you took the time to structure what I know is very important work to you in this form and fashion, and kind of make it more presentist by touching on the events from the Super Bowl. I myself have comments and questions for you to kind of unpack. There's nothing like interacting with a scholar of Dr. Freeman's caliber who is constantly in flow. Some people reach a point of fixation. They become, pretty concrete in their positions. But every time I engage with conversation with Dr. Freeman, I can see he's always taking something in and always deciding which direction he wants to go, but it's never a fixed thing. So I'm grateful to have someone of your caliber in this space. And if you have any questions or things that you want to share and you're not able to unmic, please go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm going to ask for the screen back, Dr. Freeman, in case people raise their hands so I can see. So if you have comments and you want to mention, I think that's you, William. I will come to you in just a second. Latasha as well. I'm going to start this off with a question for you because of what you centered your presentation on. I'm at a point where I think there's a bit of a danger with art constantly being the Trojan horse. I think they know it's coming, right? It's these hidden messages, and we just have so much fun. Like we're, ooh, they said that and they didn't catch this. And I'm tired of us acting like we have to create something that has to be figured out. Um, do these coded messages still exist? I think they're kind of attached to the covert methods we once used to communicate during slavery or Jim Crow era, you know, um, and that's good to reflect about that element of survival that was necessary. But at this point in time, do you think we need to be more overt in how we're communicating some of these plights? And you mentioned King, and I had Douglas as well. That 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 the bar was set so high with those guys in media. And if you read what Douglas was talking about in his speeches or writing about or publishing in his newspaper, or if you catch any of the meaningful interactions that King had with media, that was the first RELC chat we did last month. So I think you get an understanding of what they were doing with those spaces. Why are we going back to when we used to have to do some signaling or winking and nodding instead of remaining that forceful? And I think that's kind of where you left off. So if you can unpack that a little bit, like to hear from you about it.
Yeah, I think one for the opportunity to speak today, and two, thanks again for the question. I think one of the things, as I was thinking about how to label the four things, what came to mind is the core four to prepare for war, right? This idea of we as a people have not prepared ourselves to be out there for the long haul. We've lost something in the midst in terms of, and I'm speaking from my own experience from not reading enough, not engaging deep enough into the multiple facets of our society around the political world, around economics, around education, around social justice, and we become responsive to what comes out. And so when you are constantly um, trying to respond to something, you don't have the ability to last a long time. And so one of the things that I will encourage folks to do is and is with the last one there is slow down to think clearly. Take the time and build the muscles up around your knowledge base, making sure your body and mind can handle the reaction that's going to come when you are out there, and making sure you're able to stand your own ground And without the knowledge, you're not able to do that. So I think we slept, and using your language, I think we went back because we are not as prepared as we used to be. In those days, everyone knew what the game plan was. It was civil rights, and and there was some trainings in place to make sure that folks can go inside diners and take the cigarette butts and the hot coffee. Like there was trainings in place to prepare folks to take that. And currently, as a Black community, I'm not sure. I haven't seen trainings to prepare us to be out there.
They're out there, and I think a couple of folks on here might speak to those. I think the grassroots effort
Mhm.
is there. The issues that I believe disrupt some authentic engagement are related to, this media thing, man. There is so much power. Imagine uh, 20 million people are saying, hey, these are the things we want when we're specific, we're organized, but there's two or three people that control these levers of communication and what we prioritize from a national standard. So that is playing a significant game, I believe, on us. But I believe we can break through. William, I'm coming to you. You had a question?
Um, yeah, I do. One thing I want to just kind of piggyback off what he was just saying, which Ada say this all the time. Our people got to stop being reactionary and be active. Be active. So when you talk about building muscle, I think people got to understand it's the long game you got to play. And when you talk about knowledge, I think the knowledge need to be anchored in when you say who are we. King said it best, we are the descendants of slaves. These are King's words. He said, we are the descendants of slaves. I think what we find in our group, when we look into our group, a lot of times what I feel we find is that you got people saying we kings and queens, we come from kings and queens. No, when they were putting those people on those ships, they weren't the kings and queens. It was kings and queens putting those people on those ships that our people came through that Atlantic slave trade. I think the misconcept of who we are, we go from black excellence, we go to kings and queens. It's hard to fight when you're delusional of your positioning. So my question would be to the doctor, how do we get our people to move from disillusion to their reality?
Hmm. Knowledge. I think everything starts with unpacking your identity, and your identity comes with self-awareness, unpacking your experience of what made you who you are, and then reading about the history of how you came to be. And so one of the journeys I've been on is diving deep into who is Germaine Freeman. From it's going, I mean, it started years ago with 23andMe, and which we know that even some of that is not true, but that this idea of trying to understand who I am. Now, with that being said, one of the answers I'm going to give is not a political answer. It's just what works for Germaine. I started with understanding who I am in my own personal faith. And as I begin to unpack who I am in my own personal faith and what I believe my own personal faith and what am I capable of and what should I be able to do, that has allowed me to begin to open my eyes up to um, gathering more knowledge since. So I guess my answer to your question in a direct way is you have to get back to the core. You have to fully understand your core, and then you have to think beyond what you know about yourself. And that's a challenge. And so step one of doing that for me was I thought I could only run a mile, for example. I would run a mile and a quarter. So if you do that over years, if you constantly pushing yourself to go beyond what you think you can do, you begin to understand that there's more inside of you than you realize, but you just got to push beyond that limit. So, reading one book, reading something I started years ago is meditating for 1 minute and then upping it to 2 minutes and then upping it to 10. And now I can sit in meditation for as long as my heart's desire because I've built up this idea that I can do more than what I think I can do. So that's kind of where I'm landing with that question.
Great engagement there, William and Dr. Freeman. I think so much is important, and Latasha just spoke to it. And I'm coming to you in a second, Latasha. Introspection is super critical to any progress. I mean, you cannot go anywhere as an individual, let alone a collective, if you're not inside yourself adjusting and making drawing real time conclusions about what's purposeful to you, what's important to you, and by extension to your family, and by extension to your friends and colleagues, et cetera, et cetera. And then you just have to prioritize that and move with it. So absolutely, you got to look inside before you look without. Ms. Gibson, coming to you next. You got a comment or a question?
Yeah, both. So, yeah, so I want to thank you for this presentation because it definitely spoke to me. My background is in the STEM field, so even though I'm not a Black male, a lot of what you spoke about, I do relate to, especially going into a male, white male dominated field of engineering. And I think going in, even before I was pretty much indoctrinated, I did MSEN, which was a pre-college program and for high school and middle school, and then inroads. Once I got into college, and everything about those programs, even though I do respect what they've done in terms of promoting the skill set of ADOS or Black Americans into the STEM profession. A lot of it was along the lines of respectability, politics, how to dress for interviews, getting to work early, leaving late, overall work ethic, working harder, how to present yourself in public. And I remember, even when I was in college, it was pretty much frowned upon if you were to even wear braids, let alone have dreadlocks in corporate America. So yeah, so I do remember a lot of that, growing up, especially in my 20s. But now that I'm in the advocacy space, one of the things that we are focusing on is community, and I think you brought that up as the cheat code in the presentation. And I read a book on the March on Washington in terms of what it took to actually even just organize that, and even the due diligence that they had to do just to transport people to get that many people for the March on Washington. And one of the key items that I read in the book is that around the death, because it was Philip A. Randolph who was the visionary for the March on Washington with Ray, I believe I hope I don't get his name mixed up. Yeah, Baynard Rustin, I believe, who was the Bayard Rustin. I don't know why I get his name mixed up, but he was the architect. But it also included a lot of the other organizer and staff. And one of the main things that book made a note of is that ever since the MLK holiday was written into law as a federal holiday, uh, information about him being the one who was the visionary, as well as the work of a lot of organizers and staff, that got lost in the storyline. And the only people that you read about now are the people that spoke at the March on Washington. That's not to take away from Martin Luther King or any of the people that are associated with the Big Six. But I think that has been devastating, not just for our politics, but also for our ability to organize for material needs. And because that's, that type of, organizing skill set that hasn't necessarily been passed on. And even in the case of doing my 1 year stint in canvassing, I noticed that a lot of, Black people, especially in the, probably like the lower socioeconomic class within ourselves, have this, internalization in terms of stereotypes, especially when trying to canvass or advocate for this guaranteed income for ex-offenders, where they, make the case, well, this person is responsible for getting themselves in this situation, as opposed to understanding that this is a racist system that kind of, traps Black people into those systems, because a lot of issues with not having coming from wealth is that you're more liable to engage in crimes for the purpose of surviving. But a lot of people, on the ground, they just have a hard time seeing issues outside of themselves or decentering themselves from those issues so that they can have some sort of empathy for the people that are most affected. So, my question is, what do we do regarding this propaganda about rugged individualism? Because even when you look at what's promoted as far as a platform associated with Black people, you have this thing called Black excellence. And we're still giving out accolades for people being the first to do this or that. And I've been in a number of spaces where I've been like the only one of two Black people or one of five Black people in a room. And it's very lonely when you do not have people like yourself, because as you stated, you do not have that community to, not only give you support, but also have that kind of backing in the case that if there's like any policies or strategies that you do not agree with, or that to be anti-Black as far as its nature. So my question is, what do we do about, the propaganda that we see out now that's almost like a Trojan horse for keeping anti-Black racism alive, along with, what you talked about as far as respectability politics?
Yeah. So what came to mind first, let me move back up and say I also attend MSEN at Elizabeth City State at the time, so I'm very familiar with the program um, from sixth grade to 12th grade. Uh, so that's first. But second, so a couple weeks ago, I decided to write down these 10 things um, and 10 things that lead. It's a flushing out of the core four to prepare for war. But in those four, there's 10 things that I wrote that we should do. One particular thing that um, is coming to mind right now is when you build community, sometimes you got to be very intentional about that. So one thing I've done over the past couple of years is as I meet people, I follow up with them randomly around, just checking in with them. And just sending a simple text and saying, hey, I'm checking in on you. What this does is it says, one, you have someone who has you in mind, just enough for you to know that you're cared for by at least one person on the earth, right? Of course, people have more than that, but it's a reminder that there's one person that's thinking about you. And I've done that to the point where now the extension of that is some folks, as I make my rounds, depending on where I am, I'm like, let's go out and get breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Right. So now I'm extending this network from a check-in to let's go out and let's communicate over some bread. Um, what I've seen and what I've heard from particularly Black men, because I do this with a lot of people, but Black men particularly, their response have been, thank you so much for checking in on me. And then the ones I've had lunch, breakfast, or dinner with, they've said, I haven't done anything like this in a long time. I've always wanted to, and I didn't even know how to even get started. right? So secretly, what I'm seeing is like this society being, or culture rather, of Black men saying it's okay to call up one another and say, "Hey, let's go out and just sit down and shoot the breeze," as we used to say growing up, and just gather each other and learn different things. Because what I've learned just from the ones I've learned about stocks. So I've started stock trading recently. I've learned about um, psychology of money. I've learned new books I need to read. I've learned like all these different things that people, particularly Black men, we harvest it up through our experiences, and we want someone to give it to, but it's hard to find folks to give it to, and not like hard as in they can't be found, but having the time to spend time with folks to the point where then you can get to the spot of sharing information. And so one of the benefits, and I don't want to use this word, but it's the word that's coming to mind. The benefit of things that were happening in our past in terms of Black culture is we were in a community so much that everyone knew what was happening in our community, and we were sharing some new insights around like how to do different things. So how if you think about where we were in the 1960s, and I mean, it was a lot of community before we started going to the suburbs and all that space. There was a community being built that we knew the good, the bad, and the ugly. And those shared experiences is what drove Black people to do new things and help create new imaginations. And so that's that. So there's a list of 10, but that's the one that comes to mind around your question.
Man, appreciate that and great way to identify with the topic in such a personal way, Latasha. Um, if anyone else doesn't have anything at the moment, I want to put something else on the table, which I think speaks to, kind of the framing of this show, this particular lunchtime chat, in regards to, what are the net gains of recognizing the value essentially of Black males in our society. Um, this thing that I know you are, Dr. Freeman. We've talked about this. I did your podcast and we kind of touched on this. Um, but there's a duality in my purview of being, the ultimate coach for these young men when we're talking about, who we see coming up. But also being the most scrutinous. Your demeanor is, anybody that knows me a little bit on here knows I have, I'll eventually break the little thermostat that's measuring the temperature. It's with love, but that's some of my demeanor. I'm working on it. You have a calmer delivery, which I appreciate, and that's not really a big factor in what I'm about to engage you on. But where is that balance for us? Because we've gotten somewhere here in this society, and we want to see those young men get somewhere as well. And it's not that Black excellence mess or the pie in the sky or about the bag. We know there's something more dynamic associated with this journey. But man, the frustration. So how do you deal with that duality? I think Du Bois would have a field day with us right now.
Yeah, you can't be afraid of conflict. Um, you just can't be afraid of it. But the thing about conflict, when you enter conflict, you gotta know what you're talking about. Um, I had a privilege, and I use that word on purpose. I had a privilege one day to stop by a intersection and talk to a Black male who was selling Trump attire, Trump gear. And I recorded it, and I asked him straight up, like, dude, I just I had my recording stuff with me that day because I just finished some other work. I said, can I just record this conversation? And um, I was diving in it about 50% in terms of knowledge base of where he may be coming from. But when we started talking, I realized that he was so ingrained into the concepts that surrounded Trump that I wasn't in position to go back and forth. So I quickly recognized that. And I was like, oh, you have a deeper knowledge about this. So I'm not positioned to do this back and forth because now it's unproductive. So instead of what I did was I shifted our conversation to hearing from him and asking more questions to the point where the questions I asked him had him reflect on what he was actually saying, right? And so, and we end up, I wished him well, and it's because he was going to be traveling. Wish you safe travels. But there was no. I remember I was on the phone with my wife and I was like, "Yeah, I'm about to talk to this guy." She was like, "Be careful," and I was like, "It's okay. I'm not afraid of conflict." But I'm also wise enough to know, like, if I'm stepping into an arena, when I'm out knowledge, and to change my plan of attack. So since then, I've been like really trying to stay up on it. So I've been something I do every day is I go through YouTube and news broadcasts, and I found all things dealing with politics and health and finances, and I have a document where I'm documenting these things so that if I ever encounter, because I'm sure I will, because I'm positioning myself to encounter, then I have more knowledge to come with. And so that to me is where we have to be. We have to get the knowledge, so that we can have meaningful conversations, meaningful dialogue that has the end game of uh, making sure that every person that's breathing, that's is treated like a human being. Like that's, in essence, that's what we want. It's not like black is better than white or white is better than black. It is to say, hey, we are all human beings trying to navigate this thing called life, and we need each other. And as long as we keep going back and forth, we're both suffering. So the net gain is like coming together, but doing that with knowledge and wisdom and kindness and love and hope and joy and being grounded in who you are as a person.
Man, you're speaking to the tenets of the RELC efforts, man. This is the L is for learning, and that's where you get the knowledge. And it is all about community, and it's all about the collective, and it's about our shared humanity. We cannot ignore um, different aspects of what one segment of our population endures versus another. That is not progress. We have to address it head on, and I'm glad to have you here to help us do that. You got some comments in the chats I did not touch on earlier, but Meryl says, great to have you join us. Not from Bert T, but have wonderful community engagement and grantee partners. And Tango says she agrees introspection is very necessary, and thanks Latasha for her comments. Yeah, community does not mean that it has to be a demographic of people that are directly connected to your race or any of those things that we just utilize to disrupt our shared humanity. This is a community, and I'm glad that you got the time to share with us and be here and share some of your work and share what you're focused on. And I know it won't be the last time because this journey continues. And I look forward to us sitting down and breaking bread as well, man. We've been circling around that. We're going to get that together this year, soon, I hope. But I'll give you the floor for any last words before we call it a lunch. Dr. Freeman?
Yeah, I want to thank you again. I'll leave you with the quote that's on my last slide, which is radical imagination can inspire us to push beyond the constraints of what we think and are told is politically possible. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Everyone have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of this beautiful weather, and I hope your lunch break was well spent. You guys take care.